All right, so we are going to be looking at section 1-1, which is points, lines, and planes. This is out of chapter 1, which is over basically the basics of geometry. So we need to go through some introductory material so that you understand the beginning parts of where we're going to start. So let's take a look. We're going to start off with points. Now, here is one thing you need to make sure you understand. How we write things in geometry matter. So depending on a symbol or a line over it or different diagrams, it matters how you write everything. So let's start in with a point. A point is simply a representation of a spot in space, a point in space. It has no size, it has no dimension. It is literally just a location in space. Now, to name a point, what we simply do is we use a single printed capital letter. So if I look at the diagram over here and I wanted to name 3 points on the diagram, what I could do is I just look across and I'd say, okay, I have point A, I have point B, point C. There's 3. If I wanted to keep going though, I'd have point D and point E. Those are all of the points that are present on that diagram. Okay. The second thing that we need to learn how to write or identify is a line. A line is simply a one-dimensional figure. It is a collection of points that continue in opposite directions forever. Okay, so it is just an infinite number of points that lie in a line that make that line. Now, there are 2 ways that we name a line. One is 2 capital printed letters with a line over it. The second is a lowercase single letter, but we can only use that if it is given. And that lowercase single letter should be in cursive. So if I look over here at the diagram and I want to name 2 different lines, for example, I could do line AD. Notice I draw a line over the top. It has arrows on both ends. Now, I could not do line AE because AE is the exact same line as AD. So I could not do that. I also could not do DA. I could not do DE. Those are all the same line. A second line that I could do is I could do something like BC. And I draw the arrows over that. Now, BC, I could also do BD. BD is the same line as BC. DC is the same line as BC. But since this has that little lowercase cursive letter, I could also identify this as line M because it is a lowercase cursive letter that was given to me to identify that line. Okay? So that's 2 ways that we can name a line. Now, we have this vocabulary word that we need to get used to hearing, collinear. Collinear simply means that points that lie in the same line. So if I were to ask you, what points are collinear with the point B? Okay, so if I said, what points are collinear with point B? Well, if we look at the diagram, here's point B. Lying in the same line would be point D and point C. Okay, so that's what collinear means. The next thing that we learn about is a plane. A plane has 2 dimensionals. It is a flat surface that goes forever in each direction, but it has no thickness. Now, our world is made up of an infinite number of planes shooting through. So understand there's planes all around us in all kinds of directions. They are vertical, they are horizontal, and they are diagonally. Okay, but just understand they have no thickness, so they go left, right, up and down type thing, or forwards and backwards, but they have no thickness. Okay, now there's two ways that we name a plane. One is by three non-collinear points, so in other words, 3 points that do not lie on the line, right? But they do lie on the plane. So non-collinear, they don't lie on the same line, but they lie on the plane. So I use three of those, or I can use one capital cursive letter if given. So if I looked at this plane, I could name this plane something like this: ACV. I could also name it ABV. I could name it BCV. Okay, so all of those are the same way. I could also name it plain P because it's given to me as a capital cursive letter. Now, just like we have collinear, we also have coplanar. Okay, so coplanar means that the points lie in the same plane. So if I were to ask you again, what points are coplanar with point A, you would say B, C, and V. Okay, so if we ask coplanar with point A, we would be able to answer B, C, and V because they all lie on the same plane. Okay, so next thing we have is we have these things called postulates in geometry. Postulates is simply a presumed truth. It is something that we accept as truth without having to give a proof, having to prove it. Okay, so two of them that we need to know. These are very just common sense ones. Through any 2 points, there's exactly one line. Meaning that if on here I drew any 2 points, I don't care where they're at, there is exactly one line that goes through them. Okay? Not two, not three, there's exactly one. That's what that's saying. And then the second postulate that we have here is through any three non-collinear points, there's exactly one plane. Okay, so wherever you put three non-collinear points, there is one plane that goes through them. Exactly one plane. Okay? Now, we also have a couple other things. We have a line segment. A line segment is a portion of a line that has two endpoints. So it doesn't go on forever, it actually has a stopping point. The way that we name a line segment is by two capitals letters with a segment drawn over it. So if I were to look here and I want four different segments, I would have something like AD. I could do something like BC. I could do something like AE. And I could do something like DC. Those are four different ones. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, AD and AE lie on the same line. That is true, but they are different line segments because a line segment has a starting point and an ending point. So the length or the distance of that line segment matter. So AD is definitely different than AE. Okay, so that's how we do a line segment. The next one that we have is a ray. A ray is simply a portion of a line that has an endpoint and extends through the other point forever. Order does matter here because there is a big difference depending on direction. So direction is determined by who is the endpoint here. Okay? The way that we name a ray is by two capital letters with a ray over them. So if I were looking here and I said, hey, what is six different rays? I would have something like AD. Now, AD starts here and goes through this. Now, if I look and I said AE, that is actually the exact same ray as AD. AD and AE have the same ray. But a different one would be DA because that means I'm starting here and going through A. That is a different ray. okay? And I want 6 of them, so I would do something like DC. I could do CD. I could do DB, and I could do DE. There are 6 different rays in that diagram. Now, we also have these things called opposite rays. Opposite rays are simply 2 rays with the same endpoint, but extend in opposite directions. In other words, opposite rays will make a line. They have the same endpoint and they go forever in the other 2 directions. Okay, so opposite rays, for example, if I wanted an opposite rays here, I could say DA and DE are opposite rays because DE starts at D and goes this direction. DA starts at D and goes this direction. They have the same endpoint, but they go in opposite directions forever. All right. The last thing we really need to kind of talk about is some examples of intersections. So, what happens when 2 different lines intersect? Well, 2 different lines will always intersect at a point. Okay, so when I intersect 2 lines, I will get a point, as in the picture. Here, these 2 lines intersect at this point. Here, these 2 intersect here, these 2 intersect there. So the intersection of 2 different lines is a point. The intersection of 2 planes now is a line. It is the line of intersection between those 2 planes. Where do the planes intersect? All right, so let's try a couple here. What are 2 other ways to name RS? So we're looking for a line. So we could name that QR, or we could name it line L because we are given that lowercase cursive letter for the line. Okay, there's other ones as well. We could name it SQ. Okay, so there's a couple different ways. What are 2 other ways to name plane P? Now remember, to name plane P, you can name it by the letter, large capital cursive letter, or you can name it by 3 non-collinear points. So I could name it by RQV. I could name it by RSV. Okay, I could also name it by QSV. 3 non-collinear points. The next question, name 3 collinear points. So we're looking for points that lie in a line. I actually have 2 different options. I could do R, Q, and S. That's one option. The second option, if I wanted to, I could do T, Q, and N. So I could do that one as well. What are 2 points not coplanar with points R, S, and V? So if you're looking, we have R, S, and V. So they are all on the same plane. And if you notice, Q is also on that plane. So if I'm looking for 2 points non-coplanar, not on the plane, that would be T and N. Okay? So that's how we pick that apart. All right, let's take a look at this one. What are 2 other ways to name PQ? Well, we could name it line QP, or we could name it lowercase n, because that is given to us as well. What are 2 other ways to name plane R? So remember, to name plane R, we just need 3 non-collinear points. So I've got V, S, and T. I could do VPT, or I could do STV. Okay, so any of those would work. Name 3 collinear points. We have S, P, and T. And those are the only 3 collinear points. If I ask name 4 coplanar points, now I'm looking for points, 4 points that lie on the same plane. That would be V, T, P, and S. Okay? What about intersections? So find where the following figures intersect. So let's take a look at this. It says FG and EF. Where do they intersect? They intersect at point F. Okay, let's try another one. What about AH and HG? Well, if you notice there, those intersect at H. Okay, what about plane ABD? So plane ABD is the one on top. If you think of the box, it's the one on top. Plane AHG, that would be on the one on the back. So where do they intersect? They intersect at line AB. And the last one here, plane EFG. So I'm just going to erase that. It's getting kind of marked up quite a bit. EFG, so that's the bottom. And we want to know where does it intersect with GBC, which is this side. So that would be our line FG, because remember, two planes intersect in a line. And that is the beginnings that we're going to start with of lines, points, planes, line segments, and rays. All right, so let's keep going.